Knowing can be a curse on a person's life.
The biggest issue I see with so-called AI experts is that they think they know more than they do.
I traded in a pack of lies for a pack of truth, and I didn't know which one was heavier.
And they think they're smarter than they actually are. In general, we are all much smarter than we think we are, but much less smart, dumber than we think we are, by a lot.
Once you know the truth, you can't ever go back and pick up your suitcase of lies. Heavier or not, the truth is now yours.
This tends to plague smart people. They just can't. They define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them. So they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. That's the wishful thinking situation.
The truth really can be a heavy burden to bear. Don't expect the people around you to wake up. Just show what a bright light you can be because you are awake. But don't have any stake in the outcome of your actions. Don't expect people to get it because very often they won't.
I'm really quite close to, I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. And you can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lisa Doll 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it, just literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman. For any game. Nobody expected that rate of improvement. If you ask those same experts who think AI is not progressing at the rate that I'm saying, I think you'll find that their predictions for things like Go and other AI advancements have their batting average is quite weak. It's not good.
But if you lead by example in your life and you become a shining light in your community, this will affect others in a positive way. Just realize that they're asleep and deal with it. A lot of people are just empty portals. That's the way they are. That's one of the most important things we can do. The problem is that people have been trained to distrust everybody. Now, the most difficult thing for people is when they discover the depth of the deception that we're facing in the world today, just how all-pervasive this matrix is, and just what
only on
Matrix
becoming
is.
supernatural.
You know, what really holds this whole system in place? It's simply our belief that the system is real, and our belief in words that are written down on paper. That's what holds the system together. It's held together purely due to people's belief that the system is real. And this belief is held together by people's belief in the legal system. And this is held together in turn by people's belief in the written word. All of the secret codes and all of the numbers that they put in there, the magic that it creates, all of the symbolism that they put everywhere. There's a certain magic that is created by all of this stuff, which they use to control us. They put these secret codes everywhere, they put their Freemason signs everywhere, they put their obelisks everywhere, they do everything according to geometrical patterns. And they do it for not just because of the reason that it sets up an energy grid and they've got this dark circle of magic going on, and this is their symbolism that they use, but it also serves as a way of controlling us.
I think probably by end of next year, self-driving will encompass essentially all modes of driving and be at least 100 to 200% safer than a person by the end of next year. We're talking like maybe 18 months from now. NHTSA did a study on Tesla's Autopilot version 1, which is relatively primitive, and found that it was a 45% reduction in highway accidents. And that's despite Autopilot 1 being just version 1. Version 2, I think, will be at least 2 or 3 times better. That's the current version that's running right now. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one.
And how do we do that? I mean, if we take it that it's inevitable at this point, that some version of AI is coming down the line, how do we steer through that?
Well, I'm not normally an advocate of regulation and oversight. I mean, I think one should generally err on the side of minimizing those things. But this is a case where you have a very serious danger to the public. And therefore, there needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight on to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far.
You know, once you've done enough research, you begin to realize that one of the main purposes of this secret language is actually to control those who are researching into who the controlling hand is, and those who are researching into where things are going. They use the secret language to control those who know about them. Basically, they use it to control their opposition. And the way this is done is really quite clever. But of course, everything about this system is quite clever. But in order to understand how you are controlled by these secret markings and these secret codes, you need to understand the difference between left and right brain perception, and you need to understand how the language works, and you need to understand how the law works, what the law actually is.
I'm not really all that worried about the short-term stuff, the things that are, like narrow AI is not a species-level risk. It will result in dislocation, in lost jobs, and the sort of better weaponry and that kind of thing. But it is not a fundamental species-level risk, whereas digital superintelligence is. So it's really all about laying the groundwork to make sure that if humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do. Well, I mean, there are other things that are on a longer time scale. And obviously the things that I believe in, like extending life beyond Earth, making life multiplanetary. I'm a big believer in sort of Asimov's Foundation series, or the principle that you really want to, I recommend reading the Foundation series, but it's like if you know that there's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another Dark Ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that we're about to enter Dark Ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a Third World War. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the Dark Ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. Last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another World War again. There probably will be at some point.
Or if we have another one, it'll be the last.
Yeah, it just could be radioactive rubble. So, again, I'm not predicting. It just seems like, well, if you say given enough time, will it be? Most likely, given enough time. This has been our pattern in the past. Like I really believe in the zeroth law of Asimov's zeroth law. You know, take a set of actions most likely to support humanity into the future. But I think that sustainable energy is also obviously really important. It's tautological. If it's not sustainable, it's unsustainable.
Yeah, how close are we to solving that problem?
Well, I think that the core technologies are there with the wind, solar, with batteries. The fundamental problem is that there's an unpriced externality in the cost of CO2. The market economics works very well if things are priced correctly, but when things are not priced correctly, and something that has a real cost has zero cost, then that's where you get distortions in the market that inhibit the progress of other technologies. So essentially anything that produces carbon, it puts carbon into the atmosphere, which includes rockets, by the way, so I'm not excluding rockets from this. There has to be a price, and that you can start off with a low price, but then that price, and then depending upon whether that price has any effect on the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, you can adjust that price up or down. But in the absence of a price, we sort of pretend that digging trillions of tons of fossil fuels from deep under the earth and putting it into the atmosphere, we're pretending that has no probability of a bad outcome. And the entire scientific community is saying, obviously, it's going to have a bad outcome. Obviously, you're changing the chemical constituents of the atmosphere. So, so it's really up to people and governments to put a price on carbon, and then automatically the right thing happens. It's really straightforward. I actually think we can manage with the current carbon level, or even a little bit higher. And this is going to sound like I'm backtracking, but there's actually an argument that more carbon in the atmosphere is actually good, but up to a point. So we might actually arguably have been a little carbon starved. If you go back 200 years ago and say, okay, well, a few hundred years ago, we had 280, 290 parts per million of carbon. We're probably a little carbon starved. Now we're about 400, just past the 400 mark. I think somewhere in the 400s, probably okay.
And when you look at law, there are two types of law on Earth. There's natural law and there's man-made law.
Only on becoming supernatural.
And someone said to me the other day, wouldn't it be good if we had a book for the natural law, for the law of the white arts? I said, well, you're not going to get that because the law of the white arts is not a law that is written down. It is a law that is inherently known and it is spoken. But if we do refer to natural law as being the law of the light, i.e. white law, then we see that man-made law is the law of the dark, i.e. black law. Why do you think they call the legal book Black's Law? And see, what they do, folks, is they teach you to think in language. They teach you to always think in language, and they take you to school and they teach you to spell. This is the first thing that they teach you to do, to spell words. And these are written words. Spoken words you don't need to spell. Not in normal thinking, in normal everyday life. You don't need to spell words. You can just speak them. But once you're taught to spell, and you're taught to view words as something that is written down, then the words have a power over you. But it's a spell, it's a glamour. That's why they call it spelling. And most people don't realize that when they are spelling, they are casting spells. You know, someone could tell you to do something, and if that something is wrong, you're liable not to do it. Someone could give you an order to stand between the lions, and you may think that that's ridiculous and you won't do it. But if it's written down, you have more of a propensity to actually follow the order and to do what you're told.